welcome to another episode of CUP TV. My name is Anne Smith and today I would like to show you how my cutting machine works. I know when I first bought this that I knew that it could do so much, and yet I spent ages just looking at it, wondering how could I make it do anything. I'd seen that it could do so much and yet I couldn't do anything with it. So with that in mind, I'm going to make a card from one of my cutting files just to try and show you how easy it can be. All 4 cards in front of me have been made using just this one cutting file. The only things that I've added are an 8x8 card blank, some feathers, a few beads and some ribbon. There are just 2 pieces of card that have been cut using my guillotine. Everything else was done using the machine. I don't want to go into too much detail about the actual machine itself, simply because not everybody has this particular one, so I don't want people to get tangled up. It's best that you actually look at your own instructions just to work out the basic controls. So enough of me rabbiting on, let's get started and cut out our first shape. I'm using Studio software today. In the File menu, go to Open and find the folder where you keep your cutting files. On this side of the page, you can see all the layers needed to make the circle scallop card. On this side of the page are all the pieces needed for the square variation. At the bottom, you have the spiral flowers and the leaves. As I drag the first piece onto the cutting mat, I'm going to click onto Page View to make it easier to see what I'm doing. You need to make sure that all your pieces are inside this red outline or they won't cut properly. Next, I'm going to check that my cut lines are set. Just click on the little pair of scissors on the top right of the screen. You can see that you have the cut options on the right hand side of your screen. Next, I need to load my card into the machine. I have lined up the card on the grid on the mat, and then I've lined up the mat with the rollers in the machine. I have clicked on the Send to Silhouette button, so now I can adjust my cut settings. I have already followed the manufacturer's instructions to do a test cut. I find that as my blade starts to wear, I get a better result by reducing the pressure slightly and doing a double cut on heavier card. Today I am assuming that you have a new blade and a new mat, so I will look at some of the problems I encountered and overcame in another episode. You will find that different people have different ways of doing things. Generally, I prefer to remove the mat from the card when I cut, so that I keep the card as flat as possible, especially when I'm cutting larger pieces. I'm going to load my next piece of card into the machine and get the next layer of the card ready for cutting. All I have to do is drag the section I have just cut away from the active mat and replace it with whichever pieces I want to cut next. I am zooming out so that I can see the pieces that I need to cut next. By going back into Page View, I can accurately position all the pieces and make sure there is nothing overlapping. Once I'm happy, I can send that to cut. I don't need to adjust my settings because I'm using the same cardstock as I did before. All I have to do now is to repeat the same process until I have cut all the layers I need to make my card. Simply drag each section onto the active cutting mat in turn. If you need more than one piece cut at the same time, then duplicating is very easy. At the top right of the screen, you will see the replicate button. This will give you lots of different options to choose from. With the leaves, I've chosen that I'm going to duplicate them but mirror them. I'm also trying to lay the leaves out so that I waste as little card as possible. And then I duplicate additional leaves just to fill in some of the spaces. Once I am happy with the number of leaves that I have and the position, then I am ready to send them to the cutting machine. I'm also checking that I still have the correct settings for my cardstock. This time you can see that I'm removing the waste card from the mat. I have left the leaves stuck to the mat. Often a tool makes it easier to lift them off, but I usually find that my nails are enough. Then I'm duplicating the spiral flowers, but this time I need to rotate some of them to try to get as many as I can on the page. Just click over the little green dot and hold the mouse down while you rotate them to your required position. It is often worth spending a few minutes adjusting the position on the page. I often find I can cut more than I think just from one piece of card, and I often squeeze in smaller shapes as well so I don't waste anything. You can see here that I am deliberately overlapping one of my spiral flowers so that you can see what happens when we try and cut it. Anything over that red line just won't cut out. So now I have cut all the layers that I need to start putting my card together. The card base is really very simple. Just line each layer up evenly, sticking in place as you prefer. Spiral flowers really are so simple to make, but they are so effective. Depending on the size you choose to make these and the amount of shaping that you put into the petals, you can get lots of different looks. Curl the petals out for a beautiful open rose effect, or curl the petals in for a closed bud effect. Wind them tight, wind them loose. Experiment for lots of different effects. Usually I curl all my flowers up first and then leave them to relax for a few minutes to find their own natural curl before I start gluing them. I do make sure that I secure the bases with additional glue to make them sturdy enough for me to shape them without them falling apart. What I usually do is to make the flowers first and leave the glue to dry before I attempt any final shaping. I also like to put some shape into my leaves, so I just use my thumbnails to crease down the centres. I try to avoid just going straight down. Although it takes longer, I think that the curve adds to the shape of the leaf. You could use an embossing tool if you prefer. I have left my flowers long enough for the glue to dry, so now I'm going to use an embossing tool just to add a little extra shape to the petals. I work from the outside inwards, curling the petals out individually until I get the effect that I want. For this example, I have chosen to make a simple tent style card. I have used the additional main panel so the scallop edge is not spoilt by the fold in the card. But you can also use this panel to create an easel card. Just use as few or as many of the included layers as you want to create different effects. If you have never used a cutting machine before, or if you are thinking about buying one but you're not sure about the cost, then I hope that this CUP TV episode will give you a better idea of just what you can do with one. In my next episodes, I am going to be taking a look at some different software and also a different cutting machine. I'll also be looking at different file formats. I'm also going to share with you some of the mistakes that I've made, so hopefully you won't have to waste as much card as I have. Thank you for watching, and see you again next time.